Okay. Hello, hello, and welcome back to the next installment of Medieval Times. So, in tonight's video, we're going to be going through and taking a look at the updates and where you guys are going to head with these illustrations. So, in the previous video, you saw me talk a lot about going through gathering reference images, filling your mind with different ideas, how to be able to, kind of look at what your initial sketch is and then go shopping for images because you're not expected to come up with this stuff on your own. I'm not sure where artists get the idea that you need to know how to draw the perfect medieval cart completely out of your head without looking at other artists' references. No one has ever done this throughout the history of time. There are always other influences in whatever media it is that you like, that you enjoy. It was influenced by what has come before it. So, looking at what has come before is so important when you are doing these projects and these backgrounds and these environment pieces. It's very important, as I've stressed quite a few times up until this point. I feel like I'm always saying this, to look at other artists, look at illustrators. Photographs are a great place, but you really want to be looking at how other artists have solved for these environments and for these spaces. So, what I've got here is my color blocking. This is my flat color pass for my exterior shot. I've also got my flat color pass for the interior shot as well. Now, with each one of these, you can see over my gutter on the left-hand side, I'm using the similar reference images. So that I can keep my color space within the same realm. I'm using this one right here to influence my color space, my shadow choices. This is where I'm picking my brights, my shadows, my sky color from, my highlights, my grass. There's a lot of things that I'm going to be pulling from this very naturalistic shaded piece, but it's still got some nice blue shadows going on within the shadow space that I like a lot, and I want to try to incorporate that into my piece. So I'm starting. This looks nothing like that painting over there on the left-hand side. How do we get there? I'm not working with line art on this one. Instead, I'm going sans line art. And I think this is where, a lot of the fear kind of comes from. If you are attached and you love your line art, to be able to let it go within these paintings. So this is one of the reasons why within that working method that you're going to hear me talk about again and again within these videos and these sessions is to start from the background and then work your way to the foreground. Also, the next step is to go through and do the shadow pass. And this shadow pass is really going to help to define a lot of my shapes and my items and my forms within these sort of flat cutout images. The idea here is that I've got some good color differentiation, some good color space. There's still going to be a lot of details and other colors that get laid into each one of these sections, but this is just my base, and it allows me to be able to pick my colors and start working from it's a starting point is what it is. It also goes ahead and blocks in those color shapes so that I can start shading them all in. Got some issue with my brush where it's giving me a little bit of that outline, but I think we can get away with not doing it. So over here on the right hand side within my layers, you'll see that I've got each one of my little sections blocked and pulled out. This is later on in these videos in this class, you're going to see that when we get to the parallax, we do need to build behind the objects. But because these are static backgrounds that we're building up until this point, I have not shaded all the way behind this pillar. The camera isn't moving. We don't have a parallax effect, so it's just going to we don't have to paint behind it. But you can see that I've got all my layers blocked down into their individual sections. The same thing is going on with the interior of this cart. Now, the interior, when we look at it at this color blocking phase appears really, really boring, not that interesting. There doesn't look like there's really that many shapes and stuff going on the inside of this space. But as I start to build in with shadow and lighting, this is going to start to feel a whole heck of a lot more filled up, if you remember what the sketch looked like. So here, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my sketch and turn it all the way up so that we could see it turned on and off. So with the sketch all the way on, you can see that there's some details. My well-developed sketch, I've got patches on my bags. I've got a pillow up here on the top. Um, there's drawers, there's all kinds of details on the crates and the carts. There's nooks and crannies. There's details on the stove and the oven that need to go in there. And there's a lot of room for me to be able to add, some cool touches, right? I've got this embellishment, this coping going around the inside of the cart. Also on the outside of the cart, when we see the sketch for that, we'll notice that there is a what you call it, a window now that'll help to influence the lighting, excuse me, and make it feel more dramatic. But from that stage, as I start to turn down the opacity, you can see all those details start to disappear for now. A lot of that's going to come in with our shadow pass, and I'm going to start building that stuff in just a minute. I did two more things. So I went through and I put in the right dragon that I sketched out previously. So that's what the dragon's going to turn into now. I still had to modify it a little bit more to be able to fit within its cage, but it's on its own layer. And then I also added the carnival sign here as well. So there's still a bunch of other fun little details that are going to start to develop and grow. Those items came from, you can see how much the target over here on the right hand side, how cool of a detail that's going to have once I actually get it painted. But these details came from my original sketch page, and even though they weren't in this developed sketch, I've still got those ideas figured out over on the side, and I'm going to figure out a way to be able to work that stuff into my shot and into my scene. So that's where the dragon comes in. From here, let's go in and let's look at the exterior shot. So with the exterior shot, I've done the exact same thing. I've got a group. I've just sort of grouped all my sketches together. And once I turn that on and turn it all the way up, I think some of them are turned down on the inside there. We can see how many more details we're going to end up with on the city walls. Within the interior shot here, we've got a bunch of other coping and buildings and things like that I'm going to be creating. And all of that is going to start to come together with the shadow pass that I'm going to be doing. So hopefully this should look pretty cool by the time we start working on this today. That's where I'm heading next. So I hope that this makes sense to you guys. Just to recap real quick, I've done my paper sketch first, right? So I start there, develop out my idea. You can see how rough and none of the details are there for the exterior shot. I've got a really well developed interior shot. With the interior shot, the thing that I started with first was kind of figuring out what the big pieces of furniture were going to look like to try and create an interesting silhouette. So having this little divot and this bench run through the space really helps to break up the shot and give it some depth and some other planes and the shelves and where there's going to live within here. And then from there, going back and figuring out some more of those little details. Again, I could not have done all of this stuff on the inside here if I had not heavily gone shopping for reference images at the beginning to load my head for all kinds of different circus items and what I can include on the inside of this carnival circus wagon here. Again, same deal. Looked at a whole bunch of pictures of wagons, medieval wagons, stylized fantasy wagons, and then came up with this idea. So I want the circus tents to be sort of tied to the outside of the cart, and those are the stakes for the tent on the outside of it. So those are going to be good and colorful and give me a good little color pop within that region. And yeah, it should come together and look pretty cool. So went through, refined that, got the shapes right on the roof of the cart because they were not correct within my sketch. It feels like the whole roof is sort of leaning over, and I wanted to correct that. So I've got it good and centered now within the cart. I've also pushed and pulled some of my forms with the warp tool to get it to where it is. Now, shadow pass. is what I'm going into first. So you might be tempted to start in the beginning, or you don't quite feel like you know where to begin with this shadow pass that I keep on talking about. With some of the previous submissions that I saw, it looked like everyone is, I think most everyone's got a good idea of what shading feels like. So you know how to be able to sort of shade an object, but lighting is quite a bit different. And I want you guys to really get a sense of dramatic lighting within this within these classes and within these projects. Within each one of my reference images, right? That's the important thing that I'm looking for is what is the difference between the shadow space and the highlighted area. The same thing is very much happening within this reference image. This reference image would not be nearly as interesting if it didn't have the lighting pushing through it in the way that it does. This entire painting, this entire space is set up to have a successful shadow cast on it at different times of the day. If you know, if we're at 9 a.m. right here, no, let's say, yeah, 9 a.m. over here in the morning, and then 6 p.m. at night, and the sun's just starting to set, that shadow, that great diagonal that's moving through this piece, um, would move to the other side. But yeah, it's set up for the lighting to work, and that's kind of what I'm going to try and do with the exterior shot here. Oh, where's my exterior shot? I'm in it. Over here is make the lighting come from the top left-hand side. I've got this really ugly layer that I did last time in the previous video, just to give an idea. So I want the sun, that's this shape in the top left-hand side, to be shooting down and sort of hit on the cart within this area. And then I also want there to be some good shadow cast over the edge of my cart, bringing our attention to the doorway. Some good light hitting the hay bale, but then some shadow casting on the right-hand side. Same thing, a lot of this castle over on the in the back is going to be in shadow, but we're going to get some tight little highlights up on it. And it's also going to inform how I'm doing the lighting on the castle gate as well as the city interior. This is where the highlights are going to fall, but that also helps me understand where my shadows are going to appear. I also want to do something kind of neat to where the shadow is sort of reaching over and like there's a tree just off to the left-hand side that we can't quite see that is casting a shadow over this road. I mean, even at the end, I could go through and we've got a lot of empty space in here. That's just kind of giving the viewer's eyes some room to breathe, to be able to kind of travel back into the city. But I could likely cover one of this banner over here on the left-hand side with a tree or some foliage, depending if I feel like the composition would benefit from it. We'll see. But either way, we're going to see the shadow effects coming in to give us an idea of what time of day it is, just to sell the lighting a little bit more within this piece. I hope that makes sense. So I've got my mid-tone color here. My mid-tone is built from the shadows that we're seeing within this piece over here. This is not the best reference image. I could find something a little bit better with more depth because it's all on one flat wall. But I am seeing that there are some little divots and depressions within here that are giving me just one or two more little shadow colors. So that is going to become my first shadow pass color for these buildings within my cityscape. Now I can go in here and we're going to trust the process. So that's my line work. Let's close all that. And we've got layer 13. There it is. Layer 13 is all this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the control button and you guessed it. So I can even give this one a color. Since it's already kind of bluish, let's make it a blue color. And then we're going to start working on top of that just so we can tell what we're doing. And because I have gone through and done so much work here to be able to figure out my initial sketch, my job is made much, much easier now. So I'm going to go through, start painting in my shadows. And again, I'm constantly going to be thinking about that lighting coming in from the back left-hand side. So if it's coming in from the back left-hand side, this stuff is probably all going to be shaded. right here, but it's going to catch a little bit of highlight on the outside of itself. That's feeling pretty good to me. Underneath any of the, what you call it, decks that I've created within this space, we can have them sort of open up like that. I think that'll feel pretty good. Starting to just get in some of my shapes here. There's still going to be a highlight on each one of these pegs. We can do something more interesting on the banister, but for now, we want the light to really kind of hit this one. It's facing itself. And then we've got another extension for the deck that's coming over here. We're going to be able to see underneath it within this space. There we go. And we're just working our way through. Don't want that banister to be able to see anything. We got likely another banister back here that's going to be a little bit thinner. And we can start playing with the woodwork within this space also. So just like we saw within the city walls, this is going to show off where where the details are at within this wooden building. So let's go in and start thinking about putting in some wooden beams because we are working in that Dutch Bavarian style here. Give that beam a nice shadow, have it come all the way down. Another beam, a nice shadow coming down. All right, so that's working pretty well for this first pass. We've got another big overhang that's going on within this section. I don't want to forget about that guy. And since it's overhanging so far, let's push it back here. I want these beams to catch a little. No, they're still all going to be in shadow. So let's go ahead and shade these guys out. I use my brackets to be able to change my brush size. And this is the cool part, right? So if you get into this section and this feels like drudgery for you, background art might not be the thing for you. But if you're getting in this and you like the details and you like figuring out how you can explore the story and the architecture and being able to, just kind of tell the time and place of this area and kind of solving this puzzle, then background art might be something you really want to check out and look at. So we got the sun coming from the back left hand side. Let's go ahead and push this shadow down just a little bit more. I want to pretend that there's a big wood beam that's going over here. We can also open each one of these sections up a little bit more. So let's give it a beam on top and a little bit of a drop back, like a clef. That should look interesting. There we go. So we got the clef and then the lines going on the edge of the windows. Then we could do some fun stuff here. Let's give each one of those sort of a base and a nice thick wood beam. That's a little bit curved on the edge of each one of those. So we're not going to highlight it or darken it up too much. Over here, the light it's questionable. Isn't really going to be able to hit this section as much. We're just trying to establish some general lighting that's coming from the top left-hand side. Again, we've got another overhang on this building. All right, that's all looking pretty good. So we're starting to get a lot of our form that's being defined here. And this is exactly what I want to happen and to occur at this stage. So a little bit of lighting hitting this, but we still got a lot of other buildings. So let's leave all of that in shadow. Peeling back the layers, wood beam there, shadows coming over, but it's still going to hit some of the rooftop. Shadow underneath this roof. There we go. Got our wood beam with our little bit of a highlight on it. A little bit of shadow. Had a sort of churchy door that I sketched out. Let's keep with that churchy door kind of look because I think I'm using this shape. And we can give the overhead, the clef mark there. That's a good shape that I'm rendering. Let's make ambient occlusion pass where the light really isn't able to hit back towards the back there. The bridge, yeah, we're going to have some underline going all the way under the bridge just to tell the story where it goes. That feels good to me. Another building back here with an overhang. It's got an interesting roof on it, but for the back of that roof, I want there to be some gaps. Let's pretend there's some more wood beams here. 2, 3, that'll work. And yeah, for the bottom of this, let's go ahead and just shade all of this in. Pretend that that's getting the light. We might be able to push this a little bit further. We'll see. And then we've got an interesting overhang here for the entryway to this building. It looks like I was thinking a little bit more when I was doing my sketch. I'm not sure what all that was supposed to be, but let's call it another overhang. And we're just going to shade this out. Let's pretend that there's another wood beam here just to be able to block out, get some verticals within that section, make it a little bit more interesting. Then we've got these beams that are coming down. So they're going to have some shading on the side of them. Again, constantly I'm keeping in mind where the sun is coming from within this painting. So that's all going to be nice and bright. Bit of an overhang. We can do these as 2 different colors. So I put some barrels on the outside of the building here. So I really don't want the light to hit these barrels too much. And let's just go ahead and say that with that overhang, that a lot of this building is kind of in shadow from something else. So let's just go ahead and shade those guys out as much as I can. And we said that the light's coming from the top left-hand side. So really, this entire front face of the building is going to be in shadow here. That'll help to define some of our sides and angles. Leave our barrel open. Give it just a little bit of a wood theme there. That's feeling good to me. Other things. So we've got this big open area back here. Things that I can do with that. Let's say that a lot of this is just kind of becoming in shadow. So leave a little bit of a line for a highlight there. We can highlight some of the other stuff later on, but I'll let some of these shapes sort of disappear back into it. There we go. That's working for me. Drop that. There you go. Anything else here that needs to be in shadow? Let's give some more. Some just weird shapes over on this side. I don't know what else to call them. And we'll call these piles of manure back there at the back of the building or back of the city wall. Okay, cool. So that's just my first shadow pass here. I want to do a quick check just to see how all of this is starting to come together. And if that's starting to define, ooh, what do you know? The shapes exactly the way that I wanted it to. So it's not too much contrast there. I've still got it on another layer. So if I wanted to go in and do my burn tool in here and drop some of this stuff down and back just a little bit more, I could, or I've got the ability to be able to paint within these shadows now some other colors so that we're not just working with the boring one color shadow, and I can make it quite a bit more interesting now that but I want to work all the way through. And let's go into next, we've got the ground and the grass. All right. So the ground and the grass, I've got it separated out into two different pieces here. And I want to can see how bright that road is getting on the inside there. I said in the previous video that this is like way too bright. That's all the way up at the upper line, and we don't want that much contrast this soon. So I want to pick something that's quite a bit softer for the ground color. And I'm sure there's something in here that could work pretty well. So that green is pretty far back, but it's not that dark. Or it might be a little bit too dark. Let's try this green and see if that starts to help us define these shapes just a little bit better. All right, so again, picking my colors from my reference image. Turn that back on just so I can see, but I don't think any of this stuff is really all that important. So from here on this grass layer, let's just go ahead and make it green because it's grass and do one layer on top of it for the shadows. Yeah, that'll work. Kind of a yellowy grass going on. Pull some of these shapes. That'll work well with the highlights on the yak's head so that it's a little bit darker right around there. Using this to connect. And some shadows appearing over here. We're going to go darker with these shadows as we get closer to the front. There we go. So that'll work pretty good going across my ground for initial shadow pass. Maybe I want to connect this a little bit more with the flat color that I've got. So let's go to a color overlay, grab the green, and go just a little bit darker, a little bit more yellow. There we go. So that feels, I don't know. I kind of like it being something different like that. I also want to make this road sort of like dirt and gravel. I want the grass to be over on the left-hand side. So I think that this is helping to move us towards that dirt and gravel look that we're going for here. Yeah. So that's going to be the first pass, and you can see that it's starting to look like a Hellboy novel or something like that with the way that the buildings are starting to get some shading going on here. It's working pretty good. Next up, let's see here. I can do the castles over here on the left-hand side. Those are still really far back, and so is this one back here. So this one's really, really far away. Let's go in and do the detailing because I want to be really slow as I'm starting to work my way up and towards. Go a little less shading, a little bit further down here. Maybe one more step. There we go. And let's give this guy a blue color. He's going to be on top. So for this one, remember the shading is coming from the top left-hand side, but this is really bright and in the light, so we only want the when it gets this far away, we get the kind of global illumination, ambient inclusion going on, so the light is not going to be the shadows already aren't as dark because we've got the ambient occlusion that's functioning and working within our shot and our scene. And I'm just trying to create a little bit of contrast so that when I do put the highlights on there, they've got a little bit more interest. There you go, just some quick little rock elements coming out of there. That'll work for me. Yeah, I don't think I need too much there, just a little bit. All right. Feels good. Nice. All right, I like it. Just a little bit. All righty. This one. Let's go in here. Got our shadow color. We should be working with the same tone that we had a second ago. Let's give this one a blue color again. We'll go with the teal this time. We're up to 41 layers. Yeah, there we go. Shadow's working. That's what we want. And this one, I think I had sketched out a little bit more. So let's turn on, yeah, the original sketch. And I'm going to take that and turn it up just a little bit so we know that our shadow is already working here. And, oh man, nice straight line. If we remember, we said that we want the pillars, they're pointing down, have a little bit of a shadow on them. Okay, let's create an overhang for the wall. And we want this door here be in shadow over on the left-hand side. That same sort of scallop-looking shape. That's going to work well. We got the top of the door that's getting a little bit more shading over here. Back of these stones. Not going to get as much lighting. That's going to be fully lit. This one isn't going to get as much. So a lot of this is going to get handled with the highlights. And we're just thinking in terms of two different shades here, right? Let's give these guys some more little details. Just a little bit. The door starts to open up and have its cobblestones around it. More little cobblestone details around these guys will help sell the story. Another overhang here. Good and dark. Happy accidents. So we can see here, we're probably going to end up putting a colored roof on this guy. It's not going to be a stone roof, but either way, it's a shadow pass. So we can start doing some of the details on here. Make it feel a little bit more round than what we're seeing. There's colors in this first little pass will help remind me later on for what the heck it is that I'm doing. I likely want to make this a little bit softer of a rendering as I start to go back and refine my details. But yeah, that's working good for me right now. So each one of these, each step along the way, I'm going through and I am thinking about the highlights and the shadows and working around my initial sketch. So you can see I've still got that initial sketch barely visible underneath there. Can't really see it at all. Go in. Got a much larger door here. So it's basically the same thing, just increased and scaled up. That's a little bit cheap. If I had a week to be able to do this, and this was the only thing I had happening for a company, or if I was going to be selling posters or something, I would really make sure the architecture on this second door is unique and interesting. But I ain't got time for all that. We got two backgrounds we got to do. And I think that brings up another interesting point, right? Please try and think about where you are spending your time on the details. Are you working effectively? It's very important that you guys start to, with 3 weeks to be able to do these paintings, that you're able to deliver a fully finished painting. These projects that you guys are going to be working on are not going to get any easier. The requirements for them, the amount of scenery that you're doing is very important. So please try and trust the process that I'm introducing you guys to when it comes to how you're working through the details on these projects and building into your designs. Okay, so we got a bigger one there. That's looking good. One more. What do you know? 3 layers, totally repeating. I'm boning this one in in a pretty big way. Okay. So for the bottom of this, I really want a lot of it just to be completely shaded. As part of the castle, I don't want it to get really any light at all. So maybe there's a little bit that's starting to appear there, but for the most part, we're going to leave that stuff in shadow. I could create a more interesting door there, but for now, I don't want to. Just set myself up with some little details. I'm lessening the details within this section because it is further away and it's in the background, and I don't want this to take up too much of my time. Just making them loose. Cool. All right. You can see that I've still got a deeper shadow pass for those wood blocks that I'm going to do. Let's turn that off and let's have a quick look. All right, that castle is really starting to come together. It's looking right. I can see my two doors starting to appear, which is looking great. My castle in the background starting to look good. Now I've got all these bushes over here, and each one of these, I'm really holding myself to it to where I'm working from the background into the foreground. The yak and the Cat City Gate, the big tan shape here, is on the same layer. Probably going to do the yak first, since we're going to have to slow down on the city gate. Now we've got some foliage. Foliage is fun. We don't have to just go into a regular dark green for this. Let's see if we got any interesting colors within this piece. So this is where it gets kind of boring, right? This reference image. It's just got darker green, very naturalistic color space. So let's try and find a tree. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit further away. I could see that we're getting a few other colors. Hmm. There it is. That'll work for me. So let's go into these trees. Those are green because they're trees. Holding down Control to isolate the layer. And, oh, yeah, that is a really, really dark color that we've got there. But we can imagine that all of this stuff is shaded. This might be one of those spots that would work a little bit better with with my brush turned down to like 50%. But for now, I think just doing a committing where the lighting's coming from is the most important thing. Making some choices. Can always soften this up later on, but just go ahead and making those decisions for now. It's going to do wonders down the line. Give myself just a little bit of texture. Let's make sure that this tree over here, this guy, again, half the tree to reinforce where the lighting is coming from. This part, because we're going to have a bright highlight going on the mop handle. And notice how I'm sort of doing these semicircles with my brush turned all the way up to 100%. I've got my smoothing turned on to 25%. And my shape dynamics is turned on with this brush as well. Just to be able to start blocking in these tree forms and thinking about where the leaves are going to be. There we go. Cool. I think that could be a little bit more interesting, and so it's just not quite so round. There we go. It's a little bit like a frog, but that'll work for the trees back there. And I haven't, again, I'm not working my highlight pass. Once I get into my, after I complete this pass on this exterior illustration, I'm going to go back and I'm going to start the entire process again with the interior shot so that I'm working this entire painting within both of these different scenes with different stages. All right, got my yak selected for him. Again, I think we can find a more interesting color. I'd love to be able to use a purple, the dark purple for the yak. You know, almost there. I got to do it. I got to change this. So image adjustments, hue saturation. I want it to be more blue. Okay. That feels better to me than the dark green that was there a second ago because it's helping to drop the background back instead of pulling attention to it, which is what I want to do. Now we're ready for our yak. I've got some details here that I've planned out within my initial sketch. Yak, you've got a purple shadow, so we're going to go ahead and make you violet. Turn violet, violet. I've still got my hard brush on at 100% because I want to just go ahead and commit to some of these big shadow choices right from the get-go. I could work at 50%, but I think things are going to kind of get away from me. I'll go back after this when I start my second pass and I get my highlights in and then start making these shadows and blending between these shadows and the highlights a little bit more. You're never going to see any of that. It's creating an interesting rhythm in between the what you call the cart and the yak's fur. Even though he's got these long legs on him, I still do want to define some of these shapes. I remember years ago I did a series of dinosaurs. I had like, God, 16 dinosaur type creatures on this one page, and I was really trying to go through and complete every one of those dinosaurs, but I couldn't quite make it. But anyways, doing 16 dinosaurs on one page taught me that a lot about rendering and gave me the opportunity to be able to really sort of work on this rendering process that I'm showing you guys right now. So there's our yak. Let's give him just some other little interesting features. Got some fur on his back. Seeing where on this fella I can reinforce that shading style I'm using. Big old tufts of fur that are catching some shadow. Should look pretty cool once it's actually shaded and highlighted. So this is the first time. Well, so we've got different colored horns on this yak. The horns definitely need to be a different color, but for now, I'm going to go through and render them Just go ahead and get that one color shading pass on there. And I'll go back and do some trickery on these horns here in a bit to be able to make them look stronger. Okay, don't want to overdo it. Just a little bit. There we go. So now we got our yak. That's starting to get his shading in there. I think it's important to do these other pieces in this guy so that he actually looks hairy. Yakety yak. Oh, there he goes. Nice. Good time to hit save. And the last thing I want to do, well, there's more that I'm definitely going to keep rendering within this session, but I want to start doing the city gate. But for now, I need a bit of a break. So next video, we're going to continue on with the city wall, as well as the cart and the grass and the stuff within the foreground. Let's turn off that uh, sketch that's over the top, and we can see that we're starting to build in some of our forms and some of our shapes, and they're starting to get a little bit darker as we're moving forward. That's exactly where we want to be with this. And yeah, once I put the highlight past there, things are really going to start to pop. And you can see how I'm starting to, I think this is a good example over here, move from just the flat color into not line work. This isn't going through and adding piping around every single object, but instead I'm really painting those shadows. And this is all based on this very stinky little drawing of how the lighting is going to work within this shot. And keeping that in mind with each decision that I make as I go through and start to paint in the lighting within this first shadow pass going on top of those middle tones. All right, I hope this is useful for you guys, and yeah, jump back in for the second one. We'll have a lot more to be able to show you.